House Committee for Veteran Affairs met today, this morning, and I want to share something that really drew my attention. Now, Mr. Ryan Gallucci is the executive director for the VFW. I met him. He's a cool dude. And you'll see in his opening statement that he has more resources than most veterans. Obviously, he's the executive director of the VFW. He has some contacts. In fact, he contacted VBA leadership to get his claim moving along. Now, you and me and all the other veterans out there, we do not have that privilege or that luxury. Some of us don't even have a good VSO to work with from the beginning, which absolutely sucks. And the point I want to make is this. Mr. Gallucci is an important person with the tools and resources, and he can make calls to people, and people actually act. They move when he speaks. He had a difficult time with the CMP exam, and I'm not taking digs on him by any means, but what does that mean to the average veteran? Okay, it's not good. That's what that means. I'm also going to show you where Chairman Luttrell and the VBA offer their apologies to Mr. Gallucci, which is all cool and good, but apologies do not mean anything. And this happened to someone who has the know-how, okay, who is a very important person within the VFW food chain. And whenever he speaks, he can get things moving along. Let's go ahead and take a look at the testimony. And I want to know your thoughts on this. So comment below. Let's go ahead and take a look at his testimony. Then we're going to fast forward to the apologies here.
Thank you. Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member Pappas, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for allowing me to testify on behalf of the VFW about my recent experience with VA's contract disability exams. As an accredited service officer, I have a professional obligation to understand the nuance of VA claims. As a service-connected veteran who recently navigated the exam process, I must note that it remains both personally and professionally frustrating. I filed 2 claims related to my service in Iraq over the last 2 years. Each time, VA issued an accurate decision. However, the exam process was neither efficient nor transparent. My experiences and frustration.
Real quick, the exam, the entire, not just the exam process, but the VA disability claim process is not transparent whatsoever by any means at all. Okay? Whatsoever. Not even a little bit.
Frustrations over this time were not isolated to one vendor and more likely indicate problems with the program itself. Because of VA's self-imposed standards of speed and the rigidity of the contracts, whenever I'm ordered for a contract exam, the first vendor usually has to return it to VA. Then I have to take steps with my accredited rep to have VA issue a new exam request. Today, I'll share my experience that spans April to July of this year for a claim that I filed in February. First, I recall being auto-scheduled by one vendor while I was overseas on business. Thankfully, my accredited rep helped me reschedule. I completed the exam and my lab work on April 22nd, but something seemed off. Knowing that VA's new regulations for gastrointestinal conditions were set to become final in May, I was surprised that the examiner asked questions in line with the old regs. When the examiner also asked about current imagery from a colonoscopy, I informed them.
So real quick, small thing here. When there's a rating change and your intent to file is prior to that rating change, the VA is obligated to look at the old rating schedule and the new rating schedule, and the VA will take whichever is higher. Okay, that's how it goes. There's an N21 policy on that, but that's what he's talking about.
That I had the procedure scheduled with VA coming up on July 10th. At this point, I assumed my claim was on hold as VA waited on me. In June, however, the same vendor sent me a text message indicating that VA had ordered another exam. My accredited rep explained that according to VA's systems, VA was likely seeking a corrected DBQ. I was confident that I would not need to appear for another exam as these clarifications are routine. I was wrong. In early July, the vendor called me to schedule another appointment. Before I could commit, I asked that what additional information they needed from me. They didn't know. I asked if the original doctor had been asked to provide the information. Again, they didn't know. The date they offered was July 10th, the date of my procedure. When I said no, the only other option they could offer was July 17th in Dover, Delaware, nearly 2 hours away. I told them to return it to VA. Now, I have more resources at my disposal to handle this than most, and I was able to escalate the issue directly.
So I want to point out that he does mention that. I would have liked for him to really harp on that point, that he's at a level where he can actually contact people. We can't do that, right? Normal veterans who are not in the food chain don't have that as an option.
To MDEO and Mr. London. However, the following week, I still received a text message from a new vendor to schedule my exam, and again, they offered me July 10th. Thankfully, we worked with VA to complete my exam during the claims clinic at the VFW National Convention on July 28th, and I had a final rating 4 days later.
Side note, he does. I'm so glad he talked about that because the VA claim clinic at the national convention was amazing. And he got his rating 4 days. Tons of other veterans got their ratings within that week. And very few were denied or haven't got their rating. Okay.
From a policy perspective, the VFW has called on VA to offer veterans more agency over the claims process since at least 2016, when VA promised 30-day claims to veterans who worked with an accredited rep through the ill-fated DRC program. During COVID, VA showed flexibility when it ordered vendors to hold exams until veterans felt safe reporting. In 2021, the VFW testified before the Senate about COVID lessons, citing VA's flexibility and reiterating our call to allow veterans to drive the exam process if they so choose. Unfortunately, we were met with opposition because of VA's arbitrary 125-day timeliness standard, which was established out of thin air in 2010. Today, the average claim contains nearly twice as many issues as claims filed 14 years ago, making 125 obsolete, as it does not accurately capture veteran experiences or expectations. My condition required a general health.
So something to note is he said experiences. To paraphrase to kind of imply what he said is the claim process is taking a lot longer than 125 days. So although the VA keeps saying 125, veterans claims are lasting a lot longer than 125 days on average. So it's basically not a true representation.
Interview, lab work, and invasive imagery. When comparing my personal obligations with availability of these services, completing all of this within 125 days was fairly unrealistic. Now, I want to be clear, at no point did I ever consider my claim backlogged, but VA certainly did, putting stress on me as the veteran and on multiple vendors trying to complete a rushed and flawed process. To me, this was at best sloppy and at worst wasteful. However, it makes sense that VA works this way because days pending is what everybody is always focused on, including VSOs and Congress. Meanwhile, accredited representatives and examiners are often left holding the bag when veterans like me or the veterans I cited in my submission for the record become frustrated. I knew what to do in this situation because I'm accredited, but from years of working with veterans, this is where we lose their trust as advocates. In closing, the VFW calls on this subcommittee to work with VA.
Yeah, whenever you go to a restaurant and you order food and the food sucks and you're mad at the waiter, but it's not the waiter's problem, that's a VSO, okay? You're mad at the VA. The VSO is just there. I mean, they're the face-to-face interaction. And so VSOs get a lot of crap that honestly they don't produce, but
VSOs and exam vendors to craft better accountability metrics that reflect the total experience and to ensure every stakeholder has access to the information needed to process claims. The VFW again asks VA to provide greater agency to veterans in the process, either in the contracts or at the point of application. We've invited these discussions over the past 8 years because this is what veterans expect. We've spoken to vendors who agree this would improve efficiency, satisfaction, and potentially reduce waste. At a time when VA is processing more benefits than ever before, we have the responsibility to make this process as user-friendly as possible. That is what veterans have earned. Chairman Luttrell, Ranking Member Pappas.
All right, I'm going to pause there. I'm going to fast forward to their apologies because I want to speak on that specifically because it kind of gets on my nerves.
So, Mr. Gallucci, I'm sorry for your frustrating travel and journey through the system. I'm glad it was put to bed. So we have 4 contracting.
Okay, that's one apology. Let's go to the second one. It's at 4036. And this one's from the VA, if I can get this correct.
First, let me go on record by saying, Mr. Gallucci, I also am very pained and troubled by your experience. It's not just your experience. It's every veteran that has a similar story. And you have my commitment along with my team's commitment to make sure that we get this right for all veterans.
Okay, so I'm going to give you my thoughts. I want to know your thoughts below in the comments. My thoughts are Mr. Gallucci's situation really isn't that bad. It's pretty average. The 2 hours away, and he talks about it's 62 miles because he's in Maryland and it's in Delaware. That sucks, don't get me wrong. But there are way worse stories out there that are happening right now about CMP exams and traveling over 100+ miles. Mr. Gallucci states it was 62 miles. There are veterans going over 100 miles for their CMP exams. And there are claims in the process that are over a year. Okay. And so his issue isn't really that, I don't want to, it's not invalidated. I'm not trying to invalidate his situation. I'm just saying there are worse out there, which absolutely sucks. And keep in mind, Mr. Gallucci has the tools and assets at his hand because he is the executive director of the VFW. Normal veterans do not. And so I want to know your thoughts on that. I'm going to put out more videos on the committee here, so stay tuned for that.